Hello, Reddit. This is David Zetland, and I'm doing a little video clip to get my AMA started with some big concepts that are sometimes harder to explain in text. The first thing that I'm going to talk about almost all the time when people ask is when we talk about managing water, we should talk about managing it from a social and an economic perspective. And by social, I mean we need to that benefits everybody in the commons. That might be environmental water flows, for example. And that water has to be separated using a political process. I talk about that type of management of water in my books, in what are called part two of my books. And the amount of water set aside for social or community flows is going to depend on your level of development. If you're poor, you probably care more about growing food than having pristine rivers. But as we've seen in most developed countries, as they get wealthier, they want to have good environmental flows. So, first things first, separate out the water that everybody's going to share using a political process. That water should be set aside, protected in terms of quality and quantity. Second, the water that's left over is economic water in that it's going to be used by individuals or corporations or whatever for private benefits, and that could be drinking water, that could be agricultural irrigation water, that could be industrial water used for fracking. Um, all of those private or excludable economic uses of water are creating value for individuals, not necessarily for society. And so, in that sense, this economic water can be managed with markets and prices and so on. It's very unusual, by the way, that it's managed this way, but that's actually it is done in some places. Australia is very famous for its water markets. Singapore is very famous for its high water prices that keep the water supply and demand in balance. Okay, so that's the big picture in terms of how to separate water into first social and then economic uses. Now, when it comes to these bulk economic uses, agriculture, urban uses, industrial uses, all of these groups claim that they have a better use, and they go to politicians and they try and get the politicians to give them preferential access to water. And we see this most of the time in most countries where farmers have water rights and cities don't have enough water according to them, and they might build, for example, a desalination plant when they could be buying water from farmers at a far lower cost, but there's no such thing as a water market, and so on. So that's actually why there's a lot of strange things like farmers in California paying roughly $20 an acre foot, a very large amount of water, enough to cover 1 acre, 1 foot deep. And whereas right next door, cities are paying $2,000 an acre foot for desalinated water. That's the case in San Diego, and we're talking about 100 times multiple because it's hard for the cities to buy water from the farmers. So you see these kinds of weird situations in lots of places because water, which is just a thing, is not necessarily treated as one thing, but treated as separate things. As a footnote, I should say that a lot of water laws are terrible in the sense that they totally fail to reflect the idea that surface water and groundwater are actually joined. And that's why you have strange things like putting a well next to a river and claiming you're pumping water from the river when in fact from the well when in fact you're pumping it from the river, thereby damaging the river or damaging downflow people. Okay. Last thing I want to say in this short video is how to manage urban water, and this goes in two steps. First of all, you have to have an urban water system that brings you enough safe water. This is not true for not 1 billion but 3 billion people on the planet because the UN Millennium Development Goals were defined actually in a way that wasn't actually true as far as quality water. So you need to spend enough money on your water system. Lots of developing countries have problems with this. Usually, they have a terrible idea of let's have a water system that we're not going to maintain. That's true in most of the ex-communist countries. They haven't done any maintenance for 30 years, and so their systems are falling apart. Or we're not going to allow customers to pay for a water system, but we're also not going to fund that water system, which is what you see in a lot of developing countries where there's actually no water supply or water of good quality. So once you have to spend money on water, and by money I mean not very much. The cost per user per year in developing countries might be $50 or $100 for a good water system. That might seem a lot for a poor person, but it's much, much cheaper than being sick and not being able to work and your kids dying. In developed countries, there's usually enough money to run the systems, and most customers are they're paying the cost of service, but that cost of service doesn't reflect water scarcity. It only reflects the cost of delivering the water. And what that means is that the water supply might not be adequate for demand because the price of water is too low, essentially. So people say, water is cheap, I'm going to wash down my driveway. This is a California example. Or I'm going to grow a lawn in the desert, a Las Vegas example. Las Vegas has some of the cheapest water in the world, by the way. So my solution is to say we should raise the price of water, and people say, oh no, it's terrible, price of water goes up, and politicians say, oh no, we can't raise the price of water, and so politicians push down the price, and that, remember, leads to those shortages. So what I say is raise the price of water so that people stop using as much, and now you have extra money left over. I explain it in the link in more detail in the starting post of this thing, this AMA. But if you raise the price above the cost of service, you're going to have extra money. And my solution for that is to take that extra money and distribute it to households. So you pay more for use, but you get a refund back per household. And what that ends up doing is sending money from heavy water users to light water users, which tends to mean from richer people to poorer people if you think about pools and lawns and larger houses and so on. So anyway, just a few things to get started. I hope this was clear, and ask me more stuff in my AMA.